So today is July 25th, which is one day before my dad's birthday and 6 days before my mom's. I didn't know exactly how to make a video for their birthday like I did last year, for a video that no longer exists thanks to copyright, but eventually I got the idea of, hey, why not take what I see of my parents and put it into a KOF team? Obviously, I got to work and made the teams. Happy birthday, Mom and Dad, by the way. I didn't know exactly how to write this video's intro, other than explaining why this video exists. So yeah, that's all you need to know. Without further ado, let's get into the teams, starting with my mother. Roll the intro.
You take the battle, it's over, that I've lost my composure, cause I'm staring into space. And now my heart's beating fast, like a man's caught up in a chapter, I'll still reveal the beast. There's a beast in my soul, and it wants to evolve, keep on pushing me so I can end it. Now the words leave your tongue, where did that power come from? Send you to that place that you're condemned to.
Team member number 1, Gonitz. My mother is a very religious person, and I figured the best way to represent her devout religious nature was to get a religious character involved. Who better than the leader of the Hakeshu, a priest, and above all, the strongest of the 4 heavenly kings, Gonitz. So, to give backstory, this is Gonitz, and he was a major antagonist for KOF 96. This man is an absolute menace on the battlefield, in both lore and in gameplay. We're talking about a villain who beat the protagonist so badly, the protagonist literally had to switch up his fighting style. Now, you're probably wondering, what is he the priest of, exactly? Well, he's a devout follower of a god by the name of Orochi, who is extremely misanthropic and wants humanity dead in order to carry out Gaia's will. Now, before I end this section, this character was the second hardest boss for me to beat in KOF 15, almost harder than Ignis in KOF 2001. It took me days of grinding just to finally beat the guy with Kyoku Sanagi and Shingo Yabuki. His command grabs will forever haunt my dreams. So yeah, Gonitz is captain of the team. Up next is team member number 2, Athena Asamiya. I chose Athena because she and Sailor Moon have one thing in common. They're both magical girls. My mom really loves Sailor Moon, and who better to represent that love than the magical girl of KOF, Athena Asamiya. What's funny about this is that Athena is actually my second most hated character right behind Sylvie Pala Pala, but let's not focus on that. Anyway, backstory time. Athena Asamiya is your modern-day Japanese schoolgirl and the direct descendant of the one and only goddess, Athena, which makes my hatred for her funnier because my most hated character in Greek mythology is Athena. Anyway, Athena is an Esper with psychic powers and teamed up with her friend, Sai Kenzuo, to fight crime in her first appearing game, Psycho Soldiers. She eventually became a student of Chin Gensai, a drunken master, and shortly afterwards became a pop star. So yeah, my mother's love of Sailor Moon is ironically represented by a character I hate so dearly, but let me emphasize that there is no correlation between the two. I do not hate Sailor Moon. I actually somewhat enjoyed Sailor Moon Crystal, and my favorite character is Sailor Jupiter. Now, on to the next member. For our final member, we have Robert Garcia. Why? Because he looks like Johnny Depp. That's all. If there was a character that looked like Chris Pratt, I would have chosen that, since my mother loves Chris Pratt so much. but instead she got Johnny Depp, whom she also loves. Here's his backstory. Robert Garcia is the only child of Albert Garcia, who was best friends with Takuma Sakazaki. As a child, he lived a very carefree life, but he yearned for more, so behind his parents' back, he would sneak off to the Kyokugen-ryu dojo and spy on Takuma and Ryo's training sessions, becoming inspired to be like them. Eventually, Robert became sick of his father pushing the Garcia Foundation on him and ran away from home. He demanded Takuma train him and became a student of Takuma. Shortly after, right before Ryo's 10th birthday, Ronit Sakazaki, Ryo's mother, got into a car accident, thus causing Takuma to suddenly disappear. Forced to return home, Robert promised Ryu that he would return. Years later, Robert returned to America, and you get the gist. I'm not explaining the entire Art of Fighting lore, because that would make this video 50 minutes long. So yeah, Robert Garcia is Johnny Depp, which is funny, because he was originally inspired by Steven Seagal, and actually looked like Steven Seagal. But nowadays, they changed up his model to the point of giving him a goatee, so now he looks more like Johnny Depp than he does Steven Seagal. Now that we have my mother's team out of the way, let's get into my dad's. Starting off, we have Haomaru, the main protagonist of Samurai Showdown. I chose him because my dad really loves Samurai Jack, and I figured the best way to reference that love was through Haomaru, SNK's most famous samurai. I don't really have any commentary on this character, so let's get into the backstory. At the age of 15, Haomaru challenged Jubei Kagyu to a duel, but lost the fight because he was inexperienced. Jubei was amused by Haomaru's bravado and brought him to Nicotine Cafe, yes, that's his real name, for proper training. As he lived there, he would meet and befriend Genjuro Kibagami, a fellow student and orphan. Both became close friends, and Genbaru's hunger for power worried their master. You get the gist. To test his students, he tempted them to fight over a long unused sword, Fugu Doko, which was highly treasured, and tested them by having them fight a group of other fighters. In contrast to Genjuro, who mercilessly slaughtered his opponents, Haomaru fought his opponents until they lost the will to fight and refused to give chase. After Genjuro left Nicotine's home due to being expelled for his bloodthirsty nature, Haomaru was rewarded with access to the 5-story pagoda that housed the prized sword, where he cut the pagoda down to claim the blade. Encouraged by Nicotine to continue improving, Haomaru now travels and wanders the lands, looking for worthy challengers while he perfects his swordsmanship. So yeah, cool character to represent Samurai Jack. Next, we have Ash Crimson. Why? Because of Ash Ketchum and Pikachu. I didn't know who else to represent my dad's love of Pokemon, so I just chose Ash Crimson for the name resemblance and the fact that he has a black and yellow alt color that somewhat resembles Pikachu. Ash Crimson is my favorite KOF protagonist of all time. I love his androgynous appearance, I love his powers, and I love him as an anti-hero. Now, time for his backstory. Ash Crimson is the direct descendant of Psyche, the leader of those from the past and nicknamed the One Who Rules Time. When he was living in France, he spent his childhood years under the Bland Torch household, living with his childhood best friend Elizabeth Bland Torch, before leaving the household for unknown reasons and abandoning the Bland Torch teachings. Throughout the Tales of Ash saga, Ash acts like the antagonist by stealing 2 of the powers of the 3 sacred treasures, Chizuru's Yata Mirror and Iori Yagami's Yasakani Jewel. He did this to help gain the trust of Psyche and steal Psyche's soul, but then Psyche possessed him, thus creating Evil Ash. However, after being defeated by the winning team, that being Team Elizabeth, Ash regains control of his body and erases both himself and Psyche from existence, but thanks to the defeat of Verse in the next game, Ash was revived. So yeah, Ash represents Ash Ketchum and Pikachu. Finally, we have Omega Rugal to represent Kano from Mortal Kombat. You see, Omega Rugal and Kano have one thing in common: a single cybernetic eye that shoots lasers. Omega Rugal is actually a huge boss character throughout the KOF series, being infamous in KOF 94, 95, 98, 98 Unlimited Match, 2002, and 2002 Unlimited Match. His backstory begins before he became Omega Rugal, back when he was Rugal Bernstein. To explain, Rugal was an influential arms dealer who operated aboard his aircraft carrier, the Black Noah. When Rugal was about 25 years old, an 18-year-old Gonitz took out his eye with one strike and gave him a small portion of Orochi's power for surviving the attack. Since then, he has had a bionic eye to replace the one he lost. At some point, he had his son, Adelheid, and his daughter, Rose, with an unnamed woman, as well as a panther named Rodem. Sometime in 1986, Rugal wanted to demonstrate his power in a base at Brazil and murdered everyone he found inside. The sole survivor of the 50-man massacre was Hydern, who lost his right eye during the attack. At the time, he was too displeased with his victim to add him to his collection, so he deprived the man of his wife and child as compensation. Good God! Hydern would then spend nearly a decade filled with hatred and rage against Rugal. Then King of Fighters 94 rolled around and he recruited two secretaries, Mature and Vice, both of who were secretly aligned with Gonitz to observe Rugal, believing that he could be a suitable host for Orochi. Rugal, wanting to expand his collection, decides to host the King of Fighters tournament in 1994, with an additional twist. Fighters must form a team of 3 to compete and represent a country. Now he awaits on his battleship, the Black Noah, waiting to see the teams that will participate. And then, of course, the tournament goes on, and eventually Team Hero, consisting of Kyo Kusanagi, Benimaru Nikaido, and Goro Daimon, showed up on the boat. Rugal was happy that the team won so they could be added to his collection of former fighters who got turned into living trophies. However, Kyo Kusanagi beat the brakes off of Rugal, and thus caused the ship to explode because Rugal is a sore loser and attempted to blow up the frickin' ship. Despite believing to be dead, Rugal did survive and showed up in 1995, where he used the power of Orochi to survive. Replacing his destroyed right forearm with cybernetics, Rugal revived Saishu, brainwashed him with the help of Vice, and sent out invitations for the next King of Fighters tournament. Rugal used an abandoned missile silo as his base in 95, and abducted the winning team, which was, again, Kyo's team, to fight Saishu. Then, Kyo beat the brakes off of his father, Saishu, and then beat the brakes off of Omega Rugal. Because of this, Rugal tried to use more of the Orochi power, but it consumed him, and his body began to disintegrate. Because of this, he saw Iori Yagami, who told him that only that those of the quote-unquote bloodline could control Orochi's power. And then, of course, Rugal would come back again and again years later because, I don't know, marketing or something. Overall, Omega Rugal is one of the most annoying bosses I've ever had to fight in KOF 2002 Unlimited Match. I don't think I've hated a boss more than him, because all he does is cheese, and he's got the worst buffs in the game. However, his boss in KOF 15 was actually somewhat reasonable, but a bit disappointing because I expected the same kind of energy with that boss as I did with the 2002 Unlimited Match boss. But yeah, Rugal Bernstein was a really cool character to use to reference Kano from Mortal Kombat. But the best part about Omega Rugal is that he has way more cool stuff than just the laser eyes. His most infamous move is Genocide Cutter, and boy, that move does some nasty damage. and it's been a part of his moveset since his very first appearance. So yeah, now that we've gone over the teams, let's get into the grand finale of this video, which is that I'm going to have both teams fight each other.
Get ready for a battle of titans! Round 1, ready, go! Break it! And player 1 clinches the first round. Stand your ground. Ready, go! This battle should bring the hype.
行きます。
Reach for the top. Ready, go!
最高最高
僕には勝てないよ。Reach for the top. Ready, go! ほら。こっち。それそれ。
最高ボール。
よっと。
最高ボール。最高ボール。
Who is going to take the win?
また来てよね。
ほな、やろか。Final round. Ready, go! 遊撃戦。よっと。
これで入りなりだよ。ほら。
おっと。
それ。ほら。調子に乗るさ。
よっと。よっと。
そうきなよ。
a nail biter. Keep an eye on this matchup. Winner! 調子悪いなんて言い訳にならへんで。調子崩したままここに来たあんたの落ち度や。